The passengers of Ariadne. The first thing we saw of the Ariadne was her reflection. Not in glass, not in polished metal, but in the way the stars around her bent and smeared, as if someone had dragged a wet finger through fresh paint. The station hung ahead of us like the husk of some enormous insect, half-lit by the cold spill of a distant sun, wreathed in faint auroral halos that had no right to be there in the vacuum. Our ship's forward cameras struggled to pin her down. On one feed she was the familiar spindle and ring from the archive schematics, an old Lagrange point research platform from the early expansion. On another, the same structure appeared scorched, sections missing, the central spine twisted into a slow corkscrew. On a third, the hull plating looked new, untouched, as if she had just rolled fresh from the yard. "Still getting 3 different configurations," Kaido muttered from the sensor console. "Telemetry disagrees with itself. I don't like it." "Pick the one where the docking port's still attached," Captain Malik said dryly. "That's the one we're going to use." His voice steadied the cabin. We'd all read the brief. We all knew the dates. Facility Ariadne 3 had gone dark 207 years ago, which meant that whatever life sign our scanners had picked up from within her pressure hull was either a glitch, a trap, or an impossibility. I watched the station grow in the forward pane, my gloved hands slick inside their liner gloves. I'm not easily rattled. After 12 years on deep salvage and 3 on the Frontier Forensics Commission, you learn to compartmentalize. But there was something wrong about the way the Ariadne refused to hold still. My eyes wanted to slide off her, like trying to focus on the edge of a dream right after waking up. "Docking solution plotted," our ship's AI Nor said. Her voice was soft and clipped, cultured, modeled on Malik's grandmother. "Relative velocity down to 3 meters per second, aligning with forward ring port beta." "Copy Nor," Malik said. "Team, check seals. Once we're hard docked, we're on suits until Nor clears atmosphere." I nodded automatically, feeling the soft vibration of the harness across my chest. Beside me, Haru did the same, lips moving soundlessly as she ran through her pre-entry mantra. On Malik's other side, Torv checked the action on his pulse pistol for the 3rd time, the magnetic coils singing faintly. "This is a research relic, Torv," Haru said without looking up. "Not a pirate hab." "Yet somehow, Dr. Sato, they still sense security," Torv said. "So I will continue to be paranoid on everyone's behalf." I smiled behind my visor. Haru rolled her eyes, but there was no heat in it. We'd been together long enough to know how we each burned off nervous energy. "My name is Elena Rios. At the time, my rank was Forensic Systems Specialist on loan from the Commission, embedded with Malik's salvage outfit under special contract. My job was simple: make sense of dead machines and the dead people who had trusted them. Trace the sequence of events from final log entry to vacuum silence. Write it all up in a way that made sense to committees and insurers and bereaved families. I had never expected one of my cases to still be breathing. "Final approach," Nor announced, firing RCS. The station swelled, filling the forward pane. For a moment, the smeared starlight around her brightened into a halo, a flicker of impossible color that prickled my skin even through the ship's shielding. Then the effect snapped away, like a trick of peripheral vision. Metal kissed metal. There was the faint, satisfying thunk of docking clamps engaging, then the whine of seals pressurizing. "We are hard docked," Nor said. "Alignment within acceptable tolerance. I am reading 1 atmosphere on the station side, oxygen-nitrogen mix. Elevated CO2, trace volatiles. No immediate toxins detected, but I still recommend suit protocols until we have a more complete picture." "Agreed," Malik said. "Nor, you're in charge here. If anything twitches in our readings, you scream in my ear. Understood?" "Understood, Captain." He turned his head, visor glass catching the dim lights. "All right, people," he said. "Welcome to the Ariadne." Aye, aye. The station had been designed for a crew of 80. According to the last manifest, 67 had been on board when she went dark. Our brief said we should expect bodies. Docking umbilical is stable, Noor said. Inner hatch is responsive to handshake protocols. I can cycle it on your mark. Mark, Malik said. A shudder rolled through the hull. The forward airlock cycled with a deep, throaty rumble. Behind the sealed visor of my helmet, my breath sounded too loud. I checked the feed from my suit cams, ensuring network sync with Noor's cortex. Lines of reassuring green scrolled across my HUD. Comms check, Malik said. Torv. Receiving, Torv grunted. Haru. Loud and clear. Kaido. Yeah, I'm here. Malik's eyes flicked to me. Rios. Online, I said, recording all channels. He nodded. Let's go meet a ghost. The inner lock door rolled aside. Light poured in, thin, stale, generated by a system that had no right to still be functioning after 2 centuries. The corridor beyond was a ring segment, walls lined with conduit trunks and handholds. Dust hung in the air, sparkling in our suit lamps. No bodies, no blood, no sign of violence, just neglect, long and patient. Haru stepped forward first, scanner slate clipped to her forearm, its sensor mast unfolding like a mechanical flower. The little device chittered audibly in our open comms as it sampled air, surfaces, radiation levels. CO2 is high but survivable, she said after a moment. Oxygen a bit low, trace mold spores, nothing exotic. If someone's been living here, their lungs are probably not happy, but it's not immediately lethal. Acknowledged, Malik said. Nobody takes their helmet off until I say otherwise. Nor keep feeding us that life sign telemetry. 1 human biosignature, Noor said calmly. Station midline, approximately 200 meters spinward and 50 meters coreward from your position. Heart rate elevated but stable. No other organics detected above bacterial level. 1 person, Kaido said softly, on this whole thing for 2 centuries. If it's real, Torv said. I glanced down the curving corridor. At the limits of my suit lamps, the passage blurred, as if someone had smeared oil across a lens. Anyone else getting motion artifacts? I asked. Yes, Noor said immediately. Your cameras are registering a low-grade temporal phase variance. The station's structure is not entirely static. Plain language, Noor, Malik said. Can it hurt us? Unknown. I recommend limiting prolonged exposure beyond your suit shielding until we know more. So we go fast, Torv said. Exactly, Malik said. Haru, Torv, you're with me. We'll head straight for our mystery guest. Kaido, Rios, you trail us by 20 meters, keep an eye on system interfaces and record everything. We do this clean. We're back on the ship in 3 hours with a living miracle and enough salvage rights to keep us all in synthetic whiskey for the rest of the year. Haru made the sign of an old earth charm over her chest, assuming the miracle wants to come home. And assuming he's still human, Torv added under his breath. I pretended not to hear that. We stepped out into the Ariadne. Aye. The thing about derelicts is that they tell you who they were before you ever pull a log file. Here the story was conflicting. Some sections we passed through were pristine, as if someone had polished every bit of metal the day before, a sheen on the deck plates, the faint chemical tang of cleaning agents in the air. Other parts were scarred with heat damage, walls bubbled and blackened around sealed hatches. Once, as we crossed a transverse corridor, my lamp painted across a bank of windows, and I saw stars knotted into impossible curves beyond, as if space itself had been tied into a ball. I blinked, the image cleared, just the usual starfield, indifferent and cold. Marking that viewport, I said, dropping a beacon in the shared HUD. Replay footage later. Noted, Noor said. Halfway to the central spine, something moved ahead of us. Malik stopped, bringing up his hand. What is that? Haru whispered. Shapes. dozens of them gliding past the intersection ahead of us. Human-sized, translucent, their outlines limned in faint bluish light. They moved with the casual occupancy of commuters on an old surface train, sliding along in lines 2 or 3 abreast, eyes unfocused, faces turned inward to private thoughts. I felt my heart slam against my ribs. "Thermal?" Malik asked. "Nothing," Haru said. "No heat, no mass." I asked. "Minimal," Kaido breathed. "They're barely disturbing the local field." He sounded almost awed. The figures crossed the corridor entirely and vanished, leaving only an afterimage on our sensors that faded like a dream upon waking. My mouth had gone dry. "Everyone see that?" Malik asked. "Affirmative," Noor said. "Recording from all angles, analysis in progress." "What did it look like to you?" Haru asked softly. "Like people," I said. "Passengers," Kaido said. The word hung in the air. "Keep moving," Malik said after a moment. His voice had gone flat. "We knew this place did experiments. We'll catalog the weird later. Eyes open, keep going." I was grateful for the order. Standing still in that corridor, with the ghosts of commuters walking through us, felt wrong on some animal level, like lingering on train tracks after you've already heard the distant horn. We pressed on. The route Noor plotted took us along the outer ring for another 50 meters before cutting in toward the central core. As we moved, the environmental anomalies intensified. Sections of the corridor would shimmer for a heartbeat, replaced by another configuration, different wall panels, different signage, a different color temperature to the light, and then snap back. Once, my own hand flickered, replaced for a fraction of a second by something gaunt and gray, spatters of blood on the glove. I yanked my arm back with a shout. "You okay?" Malik snapped. "Fine," I said, heart pounding. "Just phase artifact, my camera registered it." Noor shunted the frame to our HUDs. We all saw it. We all fell silent again. I have investigated stations gutted by explosions, ships fractured by careless jumps, habitats where the air had turned to poison overnight. I have walked through hallways littered with frozen bodies. None of that unnerved me as much as watching my own hand show me its possible future. Or its remembered past. IV. We found him in a lounge. The Ariadne's midline observation deck had been designed as a place for crew to rest between shifts, to stare out at the stars and remember why they had signed up for isolation duty in the first place. The room was circular, lined with plush couches bolted to the deck. The far wall was a curve of diamond laminate viewport, currently shuttered by armored plates. He sat in one of the couches, hands resting loosely on his knees, head tilted slightly upward as if listening to distant music. He looked ordinary. Mid-30s maybe, brown hair cut short and uneven with what looked like scissors and no mirror. Pale but not sickly. He wore an old station jumpsuit, fabric faded to a soft gray, patches on the shoulders too worn to read. No beard, no visible implants beyond a standard interface jack at the base of his skull. His eyes flicked to us as we stepped in, the door hissing closed behind us. "You're late," he said mildly. His voice was hoarse with disuse, but there was no madness in it. No panic, just a weary amusement. Malik stepped forward, faceplate polarized a fraction. "Identify yourself," he said. The man blinked. "We've done this so many times," he murmured. "But fine. I am Dr. Jonah Albright, Senior Temporal Dynamics Specialist, Facility Ariadne 3, born January 3, 2219 on Luna Base 12. Personnel ID M4429. Noor's voice whispered in our ears. Cross-checking, match found in archival personnel records. Dr. Jonah Albright assigned to Ariadne 3, 2248. Listed as missing, presumed dead since 2250. If he is who he says, he is 207 years old. Jonah watched us with quiet curiosity. Haru swallowed audibly. You're Your medical profile said you were 34 when you came aboard, she said. You look 34. 35, he corrected gently. I had a birthday before the incident, though it hardly seems to matter now. Torv shifted his weight, hand resting near his sidearm. You alone here? He asked. Yes, Jonah said. Everyone else left a long time ago, or they died, or they were never here. It depends on when you ask. He tilted his head. I assume you're here to take me home again. Again, Kaito said quietly. Oh yes, Jonah's gaze flicked to him. You especially. You've been here more times than you know. You always stand there, half hidden behind your captain, trying to look smaller than you are. Kaito flinched. Malik's jaw tightened. Dr. Albright, he said. We are the salvage vessel Amun-Ra under contract with the Frontier Forensics Commission. We detected your life sign 3 days ago and were dispatched from the nearest relay. To the best of our knowledge, this is our first physical contact with Ariadne 3. Whatever else you may have experienced, this, he gestured around us, the stale air, the dust motes floating in the dim light, is happening for the first time for us. Do you understand? Jonah smiled faintly. Of course, he said, it always is. 200 years, Haru whispered. How are you alive? Jonah's eyes met hers. There was something in them that made my stomach turn over, an exhausted kindness, as of someone who had watched a tragedy unfold from every angle. The station, he said simply. She takes care of me. She would take care of you too if you stayed, but I don't recommend it. He glanced up toward the shuttered viewport. We're not exactly stationary, you see. We're docked, Malik said. We matched your orbit perfectly. You matched our position, Jonah corrected, not our time. The silence that followed felt like a vacuum in the room. You're saying this station is moving through time, I said, before I could stop myself. I'm saying, Jonah said carefully, that our world line is not aligned with the rest of the universe in the way you're used to. We slide, we skip, we loop back on ourselves, sometimes seconds, sometimes days. Once we jumped a decade in what felt like an afternoon. He shrugged one shoulder. Subjectively, I have been here for about 2 centuries. I have watched the same conversations play out dozens of times. I have seen people come aboard who were not yet born when the Ariadne was built. I have watched them die here before they were ever conceived. My skin crawled. And the people in the corridor, Haru asked, the passengers. Jonah's mouth twitched. You saw them. Yes, I said. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something on an internal checklist. They're not ghosts, he said. At least not in the way you mean. They're passengers. Passengers, Kaito repeated. Memories, Jonah said. Memories that haven't happened yet. Think of a mind as a sequence of states, each one a pattern of firing neurons. When you remember something, you re-enter that pattern briefly. A resonance. Now imagine if those patterns can propagate backwards just a little along their own world lines. Not enough to change anything. Not enough to send information. Just shadows, arriving early to stand in the places they will eventually occupy. He gestured vaguely, as if indicating the whole station. That's what the Ariadne is full of, he said. We built her to study time. Instead, we made a junction. A place where all those little backward echoes get caught. Every memory of this station that will ever exist, every person who will ever set foot here, every thought they will ever have while aboard, those patterns bleed backward, pooling here long before their owners arrive. Or long after they've left, depends how you look at it. I thought of the commuters in the corridor, eyes unfocused, sliding past us without truly seeing. I swallowed. And you, Malik asked, what are you, Dr. Albright? Are you like them? Jonah's smile faded. I don't know anymore, he said. We brought him back to the Amun-Ra. Malik insisted. Haru ran every test her portable lab could perform before we cycled the airlock, scanning Jonah's blood, his biochemistry, his neural activity. Everything came back normal. Normal for a man of 35 with the expected genetic markers and age-related cellular damage. No obvious anomalies beyond slightly elevated stress hormones and a vitamin D deficiency. Biologically, he's human, Haru said quietly over the private medical channel. I don't know how, but he is. Then he can breathe our air, Malik said. And I'd rather he be in my medbay than in that lounge while we figure out how to unfry this mess. We sealed our own hatch. Nor flushed the docking umbilical and ran a decontamination routine thorough enough to strip paint. Only when she was satisfied did we cycle the inner door. Jonah stepped onto our deck like a man, stepping onto holy ground. Smells different, he murmured, clean, linear. Haru smiled despite herself. Welcome aboard the Amun-Ra, she said. Let's get you to the medbay. He nodded, eyes flicking over the walls, the familiar layout. There was a strange déjà vu in the way he moved, as if he knew exactly where each handhold and bulkhead would be. You've been on this class of ship before, I said. Oh yes, he said absently. Many times, none of them have happened yet. He caught my expression and smiled. Don't worry, Ms. Rios. From your perspective, this is a first. How do you know my name? I asked. His gaze softened. You told me, he said. Once, a very long time ago, you sat by my bed while I was dying and you held my hand and you told me your name so I wouldn't be alone. My throat closed. We haven't done that, I said. Not yet. No, he agreed. Not yet. Haru cleared her throat. Let's, get you on the scanner, she said. Captain, you want us to isolate him. Malik considered. For now, keep him in med under Noor's watch, he said. No direct access to ship systems without my authorization. No sharp instruments left within easy reach. Treat him as a guest, but remember that we don't know what 2 centuries in a temporal knot does to a person. Yes, sir, Haru said. Jonah watched us with a kind of weary amusement. You don't have to be afraid of me, he said. If I wanted to hurt you, you'd already be dead. Trust me, I've seen it enough times. That's not as reassuring as you think, Torv muttered. Jonah laughed, a short, rough sound. Fair, he said. I forget sometimes what linear people find comforting. I didn't sleep. Officially, we were in a holding pattern. We had secured a living survivor of a 2-century-old disaster. Our job now was to stabilize his condition, secure any critical data from the station, and await further instructions from the Commission. In practice, nobody wanted to send a detailed report yet. How do you phrase, we found a man who says he's been here for 200 years, and the station is haunted by unborn memories, in a way that doesn't get your contract revoked? Malik settled for a minimal, heavily sanitized update. Survivor recovered, station environment anomalous, further details pending. Then he called a meeting in the wardroom. We sat around the narrow table, the recycled air tasting faintly of metal and mint disinfectant. Noor projected a rotating model of the Ariadne above the table, her spindle, her rings, her central core, a fat cylinder where the experimental hardware had been housed. We've mapped about 10% of the station in detail, Noor said. Anomalies are concentrated near the core, but phase variance is present throughout. I do not recommend extended exposure without further data. We also don't know how long the life support will hold out, Haru said. If Dr. Albright really has been there 2 centuries, then the system has already lasted far beyond its design specs. But it's not magic. Something will give eventually. We need the logs, I said, and the primary experiment data. Agreed, Malik said. He rubbed his eyes with thumb and forefinger. The Commission is going to want to know what happened there, and if there's anything replicable or weaponizable. Of course they are, Kaido muttered. Torv snorted. I think we've already answered the first question, he said. What happened? They broke time. It's more complicated than that, I said automatically. Temporal mechanics. Rios, Malik said quietly. Plain language. I exhaled. We built a station around a weird region of spacetime, I said. We poked it until it poked back. That much we knew from the original project brief. What we don't know is how severe the effect is, or whether it's localized to the station, or if it's leaking. Kaido paled. You think this could spread? In some models, once you create a closed time-like curve, it either collapses or it eats its surroundings, I said. Reality doesn't like paradox. It tends to either enforce consistency or tear apart anything that violates it. If the Ariadne is stuck in some kind of self-consistent loop, then the universe might allow it, Malik said, as long as it doesn't break anything else. Right, I tapped the hologram, highlighting the core. But if it's evolving, if it's unstable, then yeah, it might spread. That's why we need the data, to know what we're dealing with. Torv chewed his lip. We could just plant charges and push it out of orbit, he said. Let the star take it, make it the sun's problem. The core is not conventional mass, Nor said. You cannot simply push it. And if reality is depending on this configuration to maintain consistency, destroying it may have consequences. Such as, Malik asked. Unknown, Nor admitted. I lack sufficient data. Haru rubbed her face. We could ask Jonah, she said. He was in charge of temporal dynamics, right? He might know how to shut it down. Or he might be the reason it won't, Kaido said. He might be part of it now. We all fell silent, thinking of Jonah lying in the medbay, eyes closed under the scanner, his brain activity tracing out alien patterns in Haru's display. I'll talk to him, I said. Malik looked at me. Why you? Because he seems to like me, I said, grimacing at how that sounded. Because whatever this place did to him, he still remembers me from some other iteration. If anyone is going to get straight answers, it's someone he trusts. And if he's manipulating you, Torv asked. Then Nor will scream in your ear, I said, and you can come stun him. Nor's avatar flickered to life on the bulkhead display. A simple, stylized face, more suggestion than portrait. I am monitoring his vital signs and cortical activity constantly, she said. If he attempts anything overt, I will know. That's not what I'm worried about, Torv muttered. Neither was I, but it was a place to start. VII. He was awake when I stepped into the medbay. Haru had dimmed the lights to a soft amber. Jonah lay on the central bed, a mesh of scanner filaments spread over his shaved scalp like a spider web. Electrodes dotted his chest. The monitors beside him showed a calm, steady heart rate. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. You move like you're afraid to wake me, he said without looking over, but I don't sleep much anymore. Heard you've had a long day, I said. He laughed softly. You have no idea. I pulled a stool over and sat beside his bed, careful to angle myself so that my body cam had a clear view of his face. Mind if I ask you some questions, Dr. Albright? I asked. Oh, we're back to titles, he said. Last time you called me Jonah. This is my first time, I reminded him, as far as I know. He turned his head. In the dim amber light, his eyes looked almost golden. That's true, he said. For you this is new, for me, he sighed. Ask Elena, I'll answer what I can, I always do. Always, I echoed. How many times have we done this? He smiled without humor. Do you want the number that preserves your sanity or the real one? Start with the sane one. Dozens, he said, maybe 100, enough that I've lost track of the smaller variances. Sometimes you don't come aboard at all. Sometimes you die in the first hour. Sometimes you never leave the Ariadne. Sometimes neither do I. A chill crawled up my spine. And this time, I asked, how does this one feel to you? Different, he said quietly. You're asking different questions. I decided not to unpack that yet. Tell me about the experiment, I said instead. What happened in the core? He closed his eyes. We built a torus, he said. A ring of compressed vacuum threaded with exotic matter. We were trying to create a controllable closed time-like curve, a little loop in time, no bigger than a needle's eye, anchored by our mass and the local gravitational field. We wanted to watch particles run along it, maybe send a bit of information back a few microseconds. Nothing dramatic, just a proof of concept. Did it work? Yes, he said, too well. Images flashed through my mind. The warped stars outside the viewport, the translucent passengers in the hallway. What went wrong? I asked. Nothing, he said. That's the problem. It worked exactly as designed. If we had created an unstable loop, spacetime would have torn it apart, or it would have collapsed into a singularity and evaporated. But it didn't. The equations balanced. The loop was self-consistent. Every particle we sent through came out where and when it needed to be to avoid paradox. The universe was fine with it. He opened his eyes again. So we tried something bigger, he said. We widened the loop, just a little, enough to pass a molecule through, then a protein, then a cell, always maintaining consistency, always feeding the output back into the input in a way that didn't change the past, only fulfilled it. He laughed bitterly. We thought we were so clever. What did you send last? I asked, though I already knew. Me, he said simply. Or rather, a copy of me, a brief traversal of my own world line. We wanted to see how consciousness handled the loop, how the human mind integrated information from its own future, whether memory could be made non-local. And I prompted. And we found out, he said, in exquisite detail, over and over. He stared at the ceiling again. When I stepped into the torus, he said, I felt stretched. For a moment I was standing in every moment of my own life at once. Past and future collapsed into a single chord. I remembered things that hadn't happened yet. I forgot things that had. I watched myself walk in and out of that chamber from both directions, and in that instant the loop widened on its own. It grabbed onto every resonance it could find. Every memory of that place, past, present, future, every mind that would ever touch it, including yours. My mind, I whispered. Everyone's, he said. The Ariadne became a sink, a collector of echoes, and because I was at the core when it happened, because my pattern was at the nexus, I didn't exit the loop the way we expected. I spread. Some part of me is still in that chamber, walking into the field. Some part of me is lying here. Some part of me made it out on one of the earlier evacuation shuttles. He lived to a ripe old age on Ceres, I think, married, had 3 children. He smiled faintly. Lucky bastard, he said. You're saying there are multiple versions of you, I said. All real. Were, he corrected. Most of them are dead by now, all but the one that's anchored to the station, the one you keep finding. He tapped his chest weakly. Me, he said, or something like me. How do you know that? I asked. Because I remember dying, he said matter-of-factly. Several times, heart failure, radiation poisoning, once in a shuttle crash. He shuddered. That one was unpleasant, and yet here I am. I swallowed. What are you now, Jonah? I asked softly. He looked at me. I am a memory that refuses to decay, he said. A passenger who never disembarks. VIII. Later in the corridor outside Medbay, Torv cornered me. You believe him, he said. It wasn't a question. I believe that he believes it, I said. And I believe that our sensors are telling us there's something fundamentally wrong with that station. Nor's readings match his descriptions in broad strokes. The core is acting like a temporal attractor. That doesn't mean he's immortal, Torv said. It doesn't mean he's some kind of echo. It could just be that the station slowed his aging somehow. Time dilation, stasis field, whatever. Maybe, I said, but it doesn't explain the passengers, or the way our own cameras are showing multiple states of the same spaces. Torv frowned. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, I said carefully, that from the universe's point of view, the Ariadne isn't a single point in time. It's a whole thickened region of the timeline, a knot. Inside that knot, multiple versions of events coexist, as long as they all fit into a self-consistent picture. That's why you can have Jonah dying in a shuttle crash on Ceres and Jonah sitting in our medbay and Jonah perpetually stepping into the core. All of those world lines are part of a larger, self-consistent pattern. Torv rubbed his temples. You know that makes my head hurt when you talk like that. Sorry, I said. The short version is, he can die and still persist as long as some part of his pattern remains in the knot, as long as someone remembers him in that place. Someone like you, he said. Maybe, I admitted. He studied me for a long moment. Captain wants to know if we can shut it down, he said. Blow the core, cut the knot, whatever. He wants options. So do I said. But if we're inside a self-consistent loop, then anything we do to shut it down is something we've already done, or tried. If we were capable of destroying the Ariadne without wrecking causal structure, it would already be gone. The fact that she's still there implies. Implies what? He pressed. Implies that either we haven't found the way yet, I said slowly, or that our attempts to destroy her are part of what keeps the loop intact. Torv swore softly. Fantastic, he said. So we're either helpless or complicit. Welcome to temporal mechanics, I said. IX. We went back aboard. Of course we did. This is the part where, in a story, someone would suggest cutting our losses, leaving the station to drift alone through its knot of time, filing a report, and letting someone with bigger guns and braver lawyers handle it. In real life, people don't behave that rationally. Not when there's curiosity involved. Not when there's the promise of understanding something that has been haunting physics for centuries. Not when you've looked into the eyes of a man who has been alone for 200 years and promised him you'll try to help. Malik could have said no. He could have ordered our docking clamps released and told Noor to take us home. He didn't. We go in pairs, he said instead. No one alone. Time inside is limited to 4 hours per person max until we understand the exposure effects. Noor will monitor phase variance in real time. If she tells you to run, you run. No arguments. Haru and Kaido volunteered to stay on the Amun-Ra for the first run, monitoring our vitals, and Jonah, Malik, Torv, and I would go back in. Our goal was to reach the core access level and pull whatever experimental logs we could access without touching anything that hummed, glowed, or made our teeth ache. As we cycled back through the docking umbilical, I felt a strange tightness in my chest. It wasn't fear of the station itself exactly. It was fear of familiarity. Of stepping into a place and realizing you knew it too well. The air tasted the same as before. Stale, metallic. As the inner hatch opened, I braced myself for the sight of more passengers gliding past, but the corridor beyond was empty. Life support still stable, Noor said in our ear. Phase variance up 3% since your last entry. Be advised, the station's temporal distortion appears to be intensifying over time. Over whose time? Malik asked. Yours, Noor said. From my frame of reference aboard the Amun-Ra, each second I measure corresponds to approximately 1.03 seconds inside the station. The ratio is slowly increasing. Time is running faster in there, Torv said. For now, Noor said, it may oscillate. Of course it will, I muttered. We moved quickly, following the route Noor overlaid on our HUDs. This time the stationscape shifted more aggressively. Whole doorways appeared and vanished between one step and the next. At one point the corridor ahead of us flickered and was suddenly choked with frozen bodies, floating in zero-G, eyes staring. Before the scream could fully form in my throat, the vision collapsed, leaving only empty air. Record and tag, I said through clenched teeth. We need to know which of these are options and which are history. Understood, Noor said. At the first transverse junction, a child ran past us. She was maybe 8 years old, hair in tight dark curls, wearing a faded t-shirt with a cartoon rocket on it. She barreled along in zero-G, pushing off the walls with practiced grace, laughter echoing down the corridor. As she passed through my suit lamp, she went slightly translucent, the light passing through her like mist. She didn't look at us. We were not in her world. "Passenger," Torv said softly. "Recording," Nor said. The sight hit me harder than the commuters had. There was something about the ordinariness of that child's joy, the everydayness of it, that made my eyes sting. "Whose memory is that?" I whispered. "Unknown," Nor said. We continued. X. The core access hatch was sealed with triple physical locks. The mechanisms were old but well-maintained. Someone had clearly been through here more than once. I wondered which version of Jonah had done the work. "Environmental readings?" Malik asked. "No abnormal toxins," Nor said. "Radiation within tolerance. Phase variance spikes around the frame but appears stable inside. I cannot sense the interior directly. Something is occluding my sensors." "Of course it is," Torv muttered. I placed my palm on the hatch. The metal felt wrong, slippery somehow, as if my fingers were sliding along a surface that had more dimensions than I had nerves to perceive. "Don't touch it," Malik said sharply. "Too late," I said. "I'm fine, it just feels strange." "Strange like that tasted funny right before you pass out?" he asked. "Strange like déjà vu," I said. "Like you've dreamed this place." His jaw clenched behind his faceplate. "Let's make this quick," he said. He and Torv worked the locks while I set up a localized recorder on the bulkhead, a little multispectral box that would keep capturing data even if our own cams failed. When everything was ready, Malik nodded. "On three," he said. 1, 2, 3. The hatch rolled open. Inside was darkness. Not the darkness of an unlit room, but something heavier, thicker, like a solid texture. My suit lamps didn't penetrate more than a meter. Beyond that, the light seemed to bend and curve back on itself, swallowed by the black. "At the limits of my sensors," Nor said, "I am detecting a region of extreme spacetime curvature approximately 15 meters ahead. Gravity gradients are anomalous but localized. Recommend no direct physical interaction with the central object." "Noted," Malik said. "Torv, you're on my right. Rios left. We go in 5 meters, take a quick sweep, grab anything that looks like a console, then get out. No heroics." "Copy," I said, though my voice sounded distant in my own ears. We stepped through. The air inside was cooler. The deck felt level under my boots, but my inner ear rebelled, insisting that we were walking up a wall or down a tunnel or at an angle that kept changing. My suit telemetry disagreed with my own senses in a way that made nausea creep up the back of my throat. Then at 3 meters in, the darkness thinned. A soft glow emerged ahead of us. Not a light source exactly, more like an absence of darkness, a region where reality had been thinned out. In that glow hung a structure like a ring of frozen smoke, spinning silently. Within the ring, the air shimmered like heat above asphalt. "The torus," I whispered. My HUD flickered. For a moment, I saw overlapping ghost images of the chamber. The torus smaller, the torus larger, the torus broken and sparking, the torus absent and replaced by a gaping wound in reality. The vision snapped back to the present configuration so violently that I staggered. "Phase variance spiking," Nor said urgently. "You are approaching the limit of what your suits can compensate for. I recommend you withdraw." "Copy," Malik said, but his voice was thick. "Just another few seconds." He approached a cluster of consoles near the wall. The interfaces, miraculously, still glowed faintly, their surfaces alive with data. As he reached toward them, the displays rippled, briefly showing his hand already resting on the controls, then empty again. "Manual access only," he said. "No wireless handshake, they're on a closed loop." "Appropriate," I said, stepping closer despite the spinning in my head. As I moved, the torus seemed to notice me. The shimmer within it intensified, colorless and all colors at once. Shapes swam in the haze, faces, places, moments. I saw myself, much older, sitting in a chair by a window, hands knotted with age. I saw myself younger, laughing with people whose faces I didn't recognize. I saw Malik without his beard, Kaido with streaks of gray in his hair, Haru holding a child whose eyes were the same shape as hers. I saw Jonah stepping into the torus, over and over and over, like frames of a looped video, each slightly misaligned with the last. Then I saw something else. Me standing where I stood now, reaching out toward the torus. My hand brushed the light. My fingertips dissolved into dust. My arm followed, unraveling in slow motion, atoms scattering into the glow. I jerked my hand back, heart hammering. "I've got data," Malik said through gritted teeth. "Some of the logs are intact. Nor, I'm pushing a copy to you through my suit." "Receiving," Nor said. "Packet integrity at 89%. I recommend immediate withdrawal." "Agreed," I said. "Captain." Something moved beside the torus. I froze. A figure stood there, half in and half out of the glow. Its edges were soft, as if it was still congealing from mist. It wore a suit like ours, but older, the design archaic. Its faceplate was mirrored. It raised a hand. For a heartbeat, I thought it was waving. Then I realized the gesture was a warning. "Go," a voice whispered in my ears. It sounded like mine. "Captain," I said, "we need to move, now." Malik tore himself away from the console. "Torv, fall back," he snapped. We backed toward the hatch, boots stumbling on a deck that seemed to tilt in random directions. Behind us, the torus pulsed. I did not look at it again. Some rational part of me knew that to meet its gaze would be to step willingly into its field, to let myself be stretched along my own world line like Jonah had been. We made it to the corridor. The hatch irised shut behind us with a heavy clunk, cutting off the glow. My legs gave out. I caught myself on the wall, panting. "Phase variance normalizing," Nor said after a moment. "Your cortical activity was disturbed. I strongly recommend no further incursions until we have processed the data you retrieved." "Agreed," Malik said hoarsely. "We've poked the dragon enough for one day." Torv was silent. When I looked over, I saw that his hands were shaking. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded jerkily. "Saw myself," he whispered, "in the light. Saw things I don't want to think about." "Me too," I said. I did not tell him that I had heard my own voice warning me. XI. We didn't make it back to the airlock. Halfway there, the corridor changed. One moment, we were walking down the same ring segment we had traversed before, our suit lamps glinting off familiar scuffs in the metal. The next, the world around us melted and reformed. The walls were a different color. The lighting strips flickered in a different cadence. There was a smear of dark, dried something on the ceiling. My stomach lurching, I looked down and saw a body at my feet. A woman in an Ariadne jumpsuit, her face twisted into an expression of frozen terror, her skin covered in lesions that looked like burst capillaries. Her eyes were fused shut with what might once have been blood. I recoiled. My boot caught her outstretched hand. Instead of pushing me away, my foot passed through her fingers as if they were smoke. "Captain," I said, "do you?" "I see her," Malik said. His voice was tight. "She's not here, not completely." "Passenger," Torv whispered, "but dead." "Memories aren't just of happy things," I said. "There's no reason the echoes would avoid trauma." The dead woman flickered, her body jerking in micro-increments like a glitched recording. For a moment her eyes opened, pupils blown wide. She looked directly at me. "Help me," she mouthed. Then she was gone. The hallway blurred again, snapping back to its previous configuration. The smear on the ceiling vanished. The air smelled cleaner. "Phase spike localized around you, Rios," Nor said. "Your suit just recorded a 0.5-second temporal displacement relative to Malik and Torv." "I fell behind?" I asked. "No," Nor said. "You jumped ahead. For half a second you existed in their future. I swallowed. What would have happened if that gap had been bigger? Torv asked. Best case desynchronization, Nor said. You experiencing events out of order. Worst case, partial decoherence of your physical structure. Atomized, Malik said. Yes, Nor said softly. I would prefer to avoid that outcome. So would I muttered. We pushed on, moving faster now, driven by a shared urgency. The station seemed to respond, its flickers coming more frequently, as if it were protesting our attempt to leave. We passed more passengers. A man in an ancient pressure suit, hand pressed to a crack in his visor, frozen in the moment before vacuum claimed him. A cluster of children floating weightless, chasing a bubble of water through the air. An old woman standing perfectly still, eyes closed, face ecstatic, as if listening to music none of us could hear. All of them insubstantial, all of them echoes. By the time we reached the docking umbilical, my nerves were raw. When the Amun-Ra's inner lock cycled open, the clean, linear air of our own ship felt like stepping out of a nightmare into daylight. We sealed the hatch. Nor engaged the clamps and backed us away, thrusters firing in careful bursts. Distance from station increasing, she said. Temporal variance in our immediate vicinity dropping toward baseline. We are leaving the knot. Good, Malik said. He turned his head to look at me. His eyes were bloodshot. Rios, as soon as you're out of that suit, I want you on those logs. Find out if there's any way to untie this thing. And Jonah, I asked. He hesitated. We'll see what the data says, he said at last. XII. The logs were a nightmare. Not because of their content, though that would have been bad enough on its own. There were technical details I barely understood even with my background, walls of tensor calculus and exotic field theory that made my head ache. There were experiment reports, ethical waivers, meeting minutes where committee members blithely approved steps that any sane oversight board would have killed. But what made it truly nightmarish was the way the logs refused to stay put. Time stamps shifted. Entries that had been labeled as Day 14 would, after a few cycles of scrolling, become Day 140. A memo I had already read vanished from the sequence, replaced by a different one from an alternate timeline where a key safety protocol had been enforced. Some days there were two versions of the same event, branched into separate columns like the forked paths of a tree. Nor, I said through gritted teeth, I need stability. I am attempting to reconstruct a self-consistent chronology, she said. However, the data itself is phase variant. It appears that the logs are storing multiple histories at once. Of course they are, I muttered. Why not? Let's just write our report in four-dimensional ink while we're at it. I took a breath. Anger wouldn't help. Each time the logs shifted, I marked the change, building a meta-record of the inconsistencies. Patterns emerged. In every variant, the core experiment proceeded in broadly the same way. Small loop, larger loop, biological traversal, Jonah steps into the torus. In some he does so over Haru's objection, except Haru hadn't been born yet, and in those variants it was a different medic objecting. In others, oversights were caught, safety thresholds raised. The experiment was delayed, then rushed, then scrapped, then revived. But always, inevitably, someone stepped into the torus. And always, inevitably, the loop widened. I am constructing a causal graph, Nor said. Even with branching histories, there is a set of events that appear invariant. They occur in every version of the logs I can parse. Invariants, I said, fixed points. Yes, Nor said. The activation of the torus, Dr. Jonah Albright's traversal, the onset of station-wide temporal anomalies, an evacuation attempt that fails in some branches and partially succeeds in others, the station's radiation signature becoming detectable from outside the system. And she hesitated. And what? I pressed. Your crew's arrival, she said, or crews resembling yours, salvage teams, forensic investigators, armed response units. In some branches, your names and faces differ. In others, they match exactly. But the pattern of an external group entering the knot recurs with high frequency. My mouth went dry. I swallowed. Are we part of the invariance nor? Based on this sample, she said, the probability is high. I stared at the shifting logs. Somewhere in the maze of possibilities, there were versions of us who had already tried every obvious solution. Destroy the core, disconnect the station's power, lure Jonah away and then bombard the Ariadne from orbit. In each branch, something had stopped them, or us. Is there any branch where the anomalies stop? I asked. Silence then. No, Nor said quietly, not that I can see. I rubbed my eyes. Then what are we supposed to do? I whispered. Perhaps, Nor said, the goal is not to stop the anomalies. Perhaps the goal is to reshape them, to alter the pattern of the knot without severing it. Into what? I asked. Into something that hurts less, she said. XII. Jonah knew. Of course he did. When I went back to the medbay with a datapad full of tangled timelines, he watched me with the calm of a man waiting for a train he has already missed 50 times. It won't show you a way out, he said before I could speak. Not in the sense you mean. You've read them? I asked. In some branches, I was the one writing the summaries, he said. In others, it was you. We've been over this ground more times than I care to contemplate. Humor me, I said. Let's pretend this is the first time. He smiled sadly. For you it is, he said. That matters. I perched on the edge of the bed. You said once that you've seen people come aboard who weren't born when the Ariadne was built, I said. That you watched them die here before they were conceived. Yes, he said. You said the passengers are memories that haven't happened yet. Yes. Whose memories? He hesitated. Everyone's, he said finally. Everyone who has ever been here, everyone who will ever be here. The station is full of them, some brighter than others, some heavier. The loop pulls them in. And me, I asked, where do I fit in this? You're loud, he said. Your pattern, I mean. Your memories resonate strongly with this place, maybe because you keep coming back. Cold crept up my spine. How many times? I whispered. He closed his eyes. Hundreds, he said, maybe more. I stopped counting when the numbers lost meaning. I swallowed. And what do I do? I asked, in those other iterations. Sometimes you die, he said. Sometimes you leave, sometimes you join me. I stared at him. Join you how? His gaze met mine, and for a moment I glimpsed the exhaustion under the surface, the bone-deep weariness of a man stretched across too much time. You stay aboard, he said. You let the station take you. Your memories, your pattern, you become part of the knot, an anchor like me, another fixed point. Why? I asked hoarsely. Because you're trying to help, he said. Because you can't stand leaving the knot as it is. Because you think that if you throw yourself into it, you can change its shape. And you're right, a little. A little, I echoed. He nodded. In the branches where you stay, he said, the passengers are different. There's less screaming, fewer dead children, more quiet moments, people holding hands, music, laughter. The pain is still there, but it's diluted, spread out. The station becomes less of a horror and more of a sanctuary, a place where all the versions of people who were hurt here can come to rest. My throat tightened. And the branches where I leave? I asked. Those ones hurt, he said softly. You take your memories with you. The knot tightens, everything sharpens, fewer shades of gray, more black and white. The station becomes a wound. Then why would I ever leave? I demanded. Because it isn't your responsibility to fix this, he said, suddenly fierce. Because you deserve a life that isn't spent as a ghost in someone else's mistake. Because staying means dying in a way no one will ever understand. I'm here now, I said, which means I haven't chosen yet. Maybe, he said, Or maybe you've chosen and the choice is rippling backward. Time's funny like that. I stood pacing. Is there any version where the Ariadne doesn't become this? I asked. Where the experiment never happens or succeeds cleanly, or the station is just a station? Not from here, he said. From here, every path I can see leads to the knot. That's what it means to be inside it. All roads lead to where we stand. And outside, I pressed, from the universe's point of view. He smiled without humor. From outside, this is probably just a weird radiation signature in a boring system, he said. A tiny spike on a sensor that most ships ignore. Maybe, occasionally, someone like you comes to investigate. From their point of view, we're just a curiosity, a story to tell at bars. They don't feel the knot the way we do. To them, it's a point. To us, it's everything. I sank back onto the stool. What if we move the knot? I asked. He frowned. Move it where? Away from people, I said. Away from traffic lanes. Away from any timeline that intersects with ordinary lives. What if we tow the station? He stared at me, then he laughed. Oh, Elena, he said. Do you have any idea how massive a segment of world line this is? How deep it runs? You can't just hook it to a tug and drag it like a dead moon. I'm not talking about thrusters, I said. I'm talking about perspective, reference frames. If we can't destroy the knot, maybe we can shift which parts of the universe it touches, adjust the conditions under which it resonates, make it harder for random ships to stumble into it. Hide it, he said. Yes, I said. Bury it in time instead of space. Make it only visible to the people who need it. Who would need this? He demanded. People like you, I said. People who can't let go. People who died here badly. People whose memories are tangled up in this place so tightly they can't decay. If the knot is going to exist no matter what we do, then maybe we can at least shape it into something gentler. A place for the passengers to rest instead of a place for them to scream. He stared at me for a long moment. That's what you always say, he whispered. Every time, you always want to turn the wound into a scar. Does it ever work? I asked. He closed his eyes. Sometimes, he said. What do you need from me to try? I asked. He opened his eyes again. They shone with something like hope. Come back to the core, he said. Not in a suit, not with your captain and your security, just you and me. We'll step into the torus together. And then, he said, we'll see if your memories are as loud as I think they are. XIV. Convincing Malik was not easy. You want to what? He demanded. We were in his tiny office, Noor's avatar hovering on the wall screen like a disapproving ancestor. I want to go back aboard, I said. With Jonah, without a suit if possible. The suits are shielding us from the full effect of the core. To reshape the knot, we have to be part of it, directly. That is the single worst idea you have ever had, Malik said flatly. And that includes that time you suggested hot-wiring a derelict reactor with chewing gum and a prayer. It worked, I said. It melted the gum, he said, and half your eyebrows. I'm serious, Captain, I said. Jonah and I stepping into the torus together might be the only way to change the topology of the knot, if we can shift the resonance profile. He held up a hand. Plain language, Rios, he said, again. I took a breath. The knot exists because Jonah's traversal created a massive backward resonance of memories centered on the Ariadne, I said. All those echoes got trapped here. They're stuck in a pattern that keeps repeating, hurting the same people in the same ways. If we add another anchor, another strong pattern, deliberately aimed at a different outcome, we might be able to bend that pattern. Create a version of the knot where the station is less malignant. And you think you're that strong pattern, he said. I think I've already become one, I said quietly. Noor's analysis of the logs shows that our crew, or crews like ours, are already in variance. I'm already tangled up in this. My memories are already bleeding into the knot. I can either let that happen passively, or I can choose how it happens. He glared at me. You're talking about walking into a machine that broke time, he said. People died in that thing. People also survived, I said. Versions of Jonah made it out. If we're inside a self-consistent loop, then any version of me that dies in the torus is balanced by a version that lives. Outside, on some other branch, there's an Elena Rios who never went near the Ariadne. She's safe. She's never even heard of this mess. But I'm not her. I'm the one who's here. His jaw clenched. I will not sign off on you committing temporal suicide based on a theory, he said. Especially not when that theory comes from a man who may literally be a hallucination with good PR. Nor, I asked, turning to the wall. The avatar's stylized eyes met mine. From a strictly probabilistic standpoint, she said, Elena's assessment is not unreasonable. The knot already contains many variants of our crew. The addition of one more may not significantly alter the global structure. However, a deliberate intervention at the core by a conscious agent with strong emotional ties to the existing patterns could, in theory, bias the resonance toward a different attractor basin. Plain language, Malik said through his teeth. It might help, Noor said. And the risk is primarily to Elena's continuity, which, as she pointed out, may already be compromised in a global sense. Thanks, I said dryly. You asked, Noor said. Malik stabbed a finger at the avatar. Can you guarantee that if she does this, the knot won't expand? That we won't make it worse? He demanded. No, Noor said. I cannot guarantee any outcome. We are operating in a regime where my predictive models are poorly constrained. Fantastic, he muttered. He looked back at me. I'm your commanding officer, he said. That means it's my job to bring you home. I am home, I said softly. This is where I've always ended up, Malik, in some branch or another. The question isn't whether I get entangled, it's whether I do it on purpose. His face contorted. For a moment I thought he would shout. Instead, he sagged back into his chair, looking suddenly older. I hate this, he said. I know, I said. He closed his eyes. If you do this, you don't do it alone, he said. I'm coming with you. No, I said immediately. Absolutely not. Someone has to stay outside. Someone who remembers me as I was to hold the anchor in the other direction. That's some metaphysical nonsense, he said. It's how entanglement works, I said. Ask Noor. She's been corrupted by spending too much time in your company, he said. No comment, Noor said. Malik rubbed his temples. Torv, he asked. Haru, Kaito, any of you have a compelling argument for why I shouldn't lock Elena in her cabin for the duration of this mission? It's already in the logs, Kaito said quietly over the open channel. We've done this before, maybe not exactly like this, but close. Jonah's right. The knot is built around fixed points. We can't change the fact that Elena matters to it. We can only choose how. Haru's voice was thick. If she goes, I want to be there, she said. In case. In case her body needs a doctor, Torv finished for her. We all know there are worse things than dying. If stepping into that thing turns her into one of those passengers. I'll pull her out, Torv said, or I'll make it quick. Comforting, I said faintly. Malik scrubbed his face. Fine, he said. Fine, we do this. But we do it my way, controlled, monitored. Nor you'll stay synced with Elena's cortical feed for as long as possible. If anything starts to go sideways, you pull her signal hard. Understood? I will try, Noor said. But if her pattern becomes fully integrated into the torus, I may not be able to distinguish her from the background. Do it anyway, he said. He looked at me, eyes bright. You come back, he said. One way or another, that's an order. I'll try, I said, but you know how time is. XV. In the end, there were no ritual farewells. We cycled the airlock one more time. Jonah walked beside me, steps steady, expression calm. He had refused a suit, saying it would only get in the way. I wore mine, but with the helmet unlocked, seals ready to break at a touch. Haru trailed us with a medical kit, Torv with a pulse pistol and an expression like a thunderstorm. Malik stayed on the Amun-Ra, jaw clenched, Noor's attention split between us and the ship's systems. Heart rate elevated, Noor said in my ear. Cortisol levels up, perfectly normal for someone about to do something this foolish. Thank you, I said. You're welcome, she said. The Ariadne's corridors were quieter this time, fewer passengers. The air felt anticipatory, like the moment before a storm breaks. At the core access hatch, Jonah placed his hand on the metal and closed his eyes. She's listening, he murmured. Who? Torv asked. The station, Jonah said. The knot, call it what you like. He looked back at me. Are you sure about this, Elena? There's still time to decide that the universe can fix its own messes. The universe doesn't care, I said. People do, and we're the ones who made this. We don't get to walk away. He nodded once sharply. Then let's do it, he said. We opened the hatch. The darkness inside welcomed us like an old friend. This time, stepping through felt easier. The deck still tilted in ways that made my bones ache, but my eyes adjusted quickly to the torus's glow. The ring of knot light spun in the center of the chamber, humming at a frequency that was more felt than heard. Cortical activity rising, Noor said quietly. Elena, your pattern is already resonating with the local field. Be careful. Define careful, I muttered. Jonah stepped toward the torus. His outline blurred at the edges, as if the knot were impatient to reclaim him. You'll need to remove the helmet, he said without looking back. The suit is dampening the coupling. Of course it is, I said. My fingers trembled as I reached up and twisted the seals. The helmet released with a soft hiss. Cool air washed over my face, carrying a faint metallic tang and something else. Ozone, maybe, or the taste of snow in the air before a storm. Vitals are stable, Haru said, but your brainwaves are unusual. Describe unusual, I said. They look like Jonah S., she said. Comforting, I said. I took a step forward, then another. Each pace brought a new wave of images. Passengers unfurled around me in layers, versions of myself at different ages, different haircuts, different scars. One limped, one laughed, one wept openly. I saw Malik younger, older, dead. I saw Torv without his cynicism, holding a baby with a gentleness I'd never seen in him. I saw Haru on a green hillside under a blue sky that no longer existed in our star maps. I saw Kaido at a console, alone in a darkened room, eyes ringed with sleeplessness as he watched a distant star flare. I saw Jonah in countless variations, alive, dead, old, young, sane, broken. I saw the Ariadne built, populated, emptied, abandoned, rediscovered, weaponized, worshipped. I saw myself walking into the torus over and over and over, each time with a slightly different expression. Determination, fear, resignation, peace. Elena, Noor said in my ear, voice faint and far away. Your pattern is decohering relative to the ship's frame. I am losing lock. It's okay, I whispered. I wasn't sure who I was reassuring. Jonah reached the edge of the torus's glow and stopped. He turned to face me. Last chance to change your mind, he said. Is it? I asked. He considered, then nodded. Yes, he said. Choice is one of the few things the knot can't steal from you. Once you step in, you'll be everywhere you've ever been and nowhere at once. If you don't want that, walk away. Will that fix anything? I asked. No, he said, but it will hurt less for you. I thought of the dead woman in the corridor, eyes pleading. The child chasing the water bubble. Jonah lying on that couch for 2 centuries, watching us come and go like the tide. I thought of all the versions of me who had already walked into this glow. Maybe they knew something I don't, I said. I stepped forward until I was beside him. The torus's light brushed my skin, raising goosebumps. It's not too late, Malik said in my ear. His voice shook. Elena, you don't have to do this. I think I already did, I said softly. I think that's why we're here. I took Jonah's hand. His fingers were warm and solid. Ready? He asked. No, I said, but I'll go anyway. We stepped into the light. XVI. For a moment, if you can call it that, there was nothing. No up, no down, no before, no after. Then there was everything. My life unfolded around me like a paper flower dropped in water. I was 5 years old, staring at the night sky through a cracked apartment window, wondering how far away the stars really were. I was 12, reading my first real book of physics, feeling my mind expand 10 sizes with every page. I was 18, failing my first university exam, sitting on the floor of a bathroom with my head in my hands, certain I had ruined everything. I was 22, kissing someone in a dark room with music too loud and feeling, for a brief moment, like I belonged somewhere. I was 30, standing in a derelict station corridor, talking to a man who said he had lived there for 200 years. I was 30, stepping into a torus of light. I was 40, giving a lecture on temporal ethics to a roomful of cadets. I was 50, sitting alone in a tiny apartment, watching my own old case reports on a screen, the Ariadne's name scrolling past in silent text. I was 70, lying in a hospice bed, a nurse holding my hand as the monitors around me hummed. I was 1,000 different versions of myself, branching and rebranching, each choice unfolding into a fan of possibilities. In some lives, I never joined Malik's crew. In others, I died in a different station, a different disaster. In a few, I made it to old age with a partner and children and a garden on a world with real sky. All of those Elenas converged here, in the glow in the knot. I felt Jonah beside me, his pattern a familiar chord in the symphony. He was stretched even thinner than I was, threads of him running through centuries, tangled around the Ariadne like ivy. He had been at the core so long that part of him had become indistinguishable from the machine. We were not alone. The passengers were all around us, not as pale ghosts now, but as full, complex patterns of being. Every crew member who had ever served on the Ariadne, every investigator who had set foot aboard, every child who had grown up hearing stories about the haunted station and dreaming about it, every physicist who had scribbled equations about closed time-like curves on a blackboard, every bored dockworker who had glanced at a newsfeed headline about a weird radiation signature in a forgotten system. They were all here, in potential, memories that had yet to be born, rippling backward along their own world lines to gather in this place. The knot pulsed with their presence, a dense cluster in the fabric of time. In the midst of it, something watched. Not a being exactly, not a mind in any sense I recognized, more like an awareness, an emergent property of all those overlapping patterns, the universe's way of keeping score, maybe, of making sure the book's balanced. It regarded us with vast, impersonal curiosity. We were tiny in its gaze, flecks of foam on the surface of a wave, and yet because we were conscious, because we cared, our choices had weight. I understood then in a way that no equation could express why the universe tolerated the knot. It wasn't because it was small or because it was self-contained, though both were true. It was because within that knot, all the pain and wonder and fear and hope of countless beings converged into something beautiful. Terrible, yes, but beautiful. The knot was a wound, but it was also a story. And stories mattered. Elena, Jonah's voice said, it came from everywhere and nowhere at once. You feel it, don't you, the shape of it? Yes, I said without speaking. It hurts. It always will, he said, but we can change how it hurts. Show me, I thought. Images unfolded, guided by Jonah's experience and my stubbornness. Branches where the Ariadne became a cautionary tale, a horror story told to scare children away from dangerous experiments. Branches where it became a shrine, a place where people came to leave their grief. Branches where it was weaponized by fools and tyrants, the knot's weird physics turned into terrible tools. Branches where it was ignored, left to drift, slowly filling with more and more passengers until it collapsed under its own psychic weight. In all of them the station's core glowed. In all of them Jonah's pattern was there. In many, mine was too. "What do you want it to be?" Jonah asked. I thought of the dead woman in the corridor, the child chasing the bubble, the commuters walking through us without seeing. I thought of every version of Jonah who had died alone, afraid. Every version of me who had walked away and spent the rest of her life wondering. "I wanted to be a place where people can rest," I said, "not a place where they're trapped in their worst moments forever." "That's not up to us," he said, "not entirely." "No," I said, "but we can nudge it." I gathered my memories. Not just of the Ariadne, but of everything. Of my parents, flawed and loving. Of friends lost and found. Of the first time I cried at a piece of music. Of the time Malik hugged me awkwardly after a close call and pretended it was just him checking my harness. Of Haru falling asleep at her desk, head pillowed on a stack of printouts. Of Torv laughing so hard he cried at a joke Kaido made. I took all of that and I poured it into the knot. Here in the torus, memory was not bound by sequence. Moments could be layered, stacked, blended. I wrapped the Ariadne's horrors in my own joys, threading them together like beads on a string. I felt Jonah do the same, contributing his own scattered lives. Laughter in a Luna bar, the smell of coffee in a lab at 4 in the morning, the sight of Earth from orbit, the terrifying beauty of watching the first particle traverse the loop. The knot shuddered. Passengers shifted around us, their patterns resonating with the new input. The dead woman's last moments softened, expanded to include the time she had spent holding her little sister's hand on a beach. The child chasing the bubble gained a future where she grew up to be a scientist who never went near the Ariadne, but still told stories about it to her grandchildren. The old woman listening to silent music became a conductor, raising her arms to bring an orchestra to life. We couldn't change what had happened to them, but we could change which parts of their lives the knot favored, which memories arrived early. The watching presence stirred. For a terrifying instant, I thought we had overstepped, that the universe would reject our meddling, snap the knot back into its original configuration, or worse, tear it open and let its contents spill out into the wider timeline. Instead, it adjusted. Like a musician tuning a string, it twisted the knot gently, bringing the new pattern into harmony with the old. The pain didn't vanish. The Ariadne was still a place of tragedy, still a station that had broken time and the people who lived on it. But the weight of that pain was redistributed, balanced by 1,000 small kindnesses that now echoed as loudly as the screams. I felt my sense of self fray. "Elena," Malik's voice whispered, faint as a memory, "come back." "I'm here," I thought. "Not there," he said, "here." Could I return? I wasn't sure if I meant anything anymore in a strict sense. I was smeared across possibilities, my pattern woven into the knot, but there were still versions of me anchored outside in linear time, versions that hadn't stepped into the torus, versions that were waiting. I reached for them. It felt like swimming upstream through a river of myself. Each branch I passed tempted me to stay, to explore the life where I had made a different choice. But I had already made this one. Paradox be damned. With an effort that had nothing to do with muscles, I pushed. The torus's glow dimmed. I stumbled. XVI. I woke on the floor of the core chamber. My head throbbed. My mouth tasted of metal. My lungs burned as if I had been holding my breath forever. "Elena," Haru's voice, hands on my shoulders, "can you hear me?" "Yes," I croaked. Her face swam into focus above me, eyes wide and red-rimmed. Behind her, Torv's outline loomed, pulse pistol still in his hand, knuckles white. Vitals stabilizing, Nor said in my ear, her voice glorious and solid. Cortical pattern altered but coherent. You're still you, mostly. Mostly, I rasped. I'll explain later, she said. For now, welcome back. I tried to sit up, the room tilted. Haru steadied me. Easy, she said. You were out for, we're not sure. Subjectively, about 20 seconds. Objectively, she glanced at her wrist. We'll sort that out later. Jonah, I said, heart lurching. Where's Jonah? The core chamber was quieter than I had ever seen it. The torus still hung in the center, but its glow was softer, less harsh. The hum had shifted to a lower pitch. It felt less like a wound and more like a scar. Jonah stood a meter away, facing the torus. His posture was relaxed, his hands at his sides. Jonah, I said. He turned. He looked older. Not decrepit, but there were lines at the corners of his eyes that hadn't been there before. A hint of gray at his temples. His gaze was clear. How long was I gone? I asked. His smile was gentle. For me, he said, 2 centuries, for you, a breath. My throat closed. Did it? I gestured weakly at the torus. Did it work? He glanced back at the glow. Listen, he said. I did. Under the hum of space-time and circuitry, I heard voices, not screams, laughter, conversation, music, a child's delighted squeal, someone humming under their breath, the ordinary, precious sounds of lives being lived. The passengers were still there, but they were different, fuller. There's still memories that haven't happened yet, Jonah said. But now more of those memories are kind. The knot is less jagged. It still hurts, but it doesn't cut as deep. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I remember, I whispered. All of them, all the branches, all the lives. Do you? He asked, curious. I searched myself. The weight of the knot was still there, but it had receded, like a vivid dream slipping away in daylight. I retained impressions, emotions, flashes of sensory detail. The endless hallways of possibility had been compressed into something I could carry without breaking. Not all, I admitted. Enough. Good, he said. If you brought the whole thing back, it would have crushed you. What about you? I asked. He shrugged. I'm still here, he said. Still the station's favorite passenger, but I'm less alone. Your pattern is in the knot now too, whether you like it or not. So are Malik's, Haru's, Torv's, Kaido's. In some branches you all stayed, in others you all left. The knot remembers both. Are we stuck? Torv asked carefully. No, Jonah said. Not in the way I am. You can still walk out that door and go back to your ship. From your perspective, this will be one weird chapter in a long, linear story. But if you ever think about the Ariadne again, if you ever dream about her, part of you will be here too. Briefly, as a passenger. And the people who died here, Haru whispered. He smiled softly. They have more to stand on now, he said. More than just the moment of their death, that matters. It doesn't bring them back, she said. No, he agreed, but it honors them. I struggled to my feet. What happens now? I asked. You leave, Jonah said. You go back to your lives. You tell whatever version of this story will make sense to the people who weren't here. You recommend that the Ariadne be marked as restricted space, a temporal hazard zone, which it will be in some branches. In others, no one believes you and curious fools keep coming. The knot will handle them a little more gently now, thanks to you. And you, I pressed. He looked at the torus. I think I'll stay, he said. Someone has to mind the passengers, make sure they find their seats. You could come with us, Haru said impulsively. We can document your condition, study you. No, he said. I've left enough times. This is where I belong now. Besides, I'm tired of trying to fit into lives where I died a long time ago. My chest ached. Will we see you again? I asked. He smiled. You already have, he said, and you will. Every time you remember me, I'll be here. That's how this works. He stepped closer and, to my surprise, pulled me into a hug. "Thank you," he whispered, "for making it hurt less." I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the solidity of him, the warmth. "Take care of them," I said. "I will," he said. We stepped back. "Time to go," Nor said quietly in my ear. "Whatever you did has stabilized the local anomalies for now, but I do not recommend pushing our luck." "Agreed," Malik said. His voice was thick. "Rios Torv, report back to the Amun-Ra. That's an order." "Yes, sir," I said. We left Jonah in the glow of the torus, the hum of the knot enfolding him like a strange lullaby. As the hatch closed behind us, I caught one last glimpse of him, standing with his hand on the ring, listening to the murmurs of unborn memories. A conductor at his podium. XVII. We filed our report. We didn't tell the truth, not all of it anyway. The official document described the Ariadne as a temporal anomaly hazard, its core experiment locked in a stable but dangerous configuration. We recommended a navigational exclusion zone, regular monitoring, and no further attempts to access the core without extensive additional research. We did not mention the passengers, or Jonah's nature, or my walk into the torus. We did, however, include a set of coordinates slightly offset from the station's actual position, ensuring that only ships with a very precise beacon, like ours, could find her easily. A small nudge, a subtle way of making the knot a little harder to stumble across by accident. The commission grumbled, argued, haggled. In some branches, they overruled us and sent in military teams. In others, they heeded our warnings. In the branch I'm writing this from, they did what bureaucracies often do with uncomfortable information. They buried it under layers of classification and moved on to the next crisis. Life went on. We took other contracts. We salvaged other derelicts. We laughed, we fought. We nearly died a few more times. Haru and Torv started sleeping in the same cabin and thought they were subtle about it. Kaido designed a ridiculous board game based on our Ariadne mission that he refused to let anyone else win. Malik grew more gray in his beard and more lines around his eyes. Sometimes, alone in my bunk, I would close my eyes and listen. If I held my breath just right, I could hear it. The faint hum of the knot, the murmur of passengers, the soft, distant sound of laughter in a station lounge that no longer existed in my timeline. Sometimes Jonah would be there too, a presence at the edge of my dreams. "Still linear?" he would ask. "For now," I'd say. "Lucky you," he'd reply. Once, half asleep, I asked him if he regretted stepping into the torus. In my dream, he smiled. "Regret is just a kind of memory," he said, "and you've taught me that memories don't have to be prisons." I woke with tears on my face and a strange lightness in my chest. XIX. Years later, a message came through on a relay we happened to be near. It was an automated burst from a remote survey drone, the kind that get fired into the void to keep an eye on forgotten corners of space. The data packet contained little more than coordinates and a brief anomaly description. "Unusual temporal radiation pattern detected in sector Q17, Nor read aloud. "Source consistent with previously catalogued object Ariadne 3. Noteworthy change in emission spectrum suggests internal configuration shift. Recommend follow-up investigation at earliest convenience." Malik looked at me. "No," I said immediately. "Agreed," he said, "hard no." Torv laughed. Haru raised her cup in a mock toast. Kaido pretended to pout. "I wanted a rematch with the torus," he said. "You can play your board game," I told him. "That's as close as you're getting." We dropped a note in the relay, forwarding the drone's report to the commission, then set a course in the opposite direction. As the stars shifted in the viewport, I closed my eyes for a moment. Still minding the passengers, I whispered to no one in particular. In the quiet of my mind, far away and very close, I felt the faintest echo of an answer. Always. XX. If you're hearing this, if my voice has made it across whatever distances and delays separate us, then you're a passenger too. Maybe you're sitting in a cramped cabin on a long-haul freighter, trying to stay awake in the small hours. Maybe you're curled up in a bed on a planet I've never heard of, listening in the dark with your eyes closed. Maybe you're on a train, or a bus, or hiding from work in a bathroom stall with your earbuds in. Wherever you are, whatever time you think it is, you're carrying this story now. The Ariadne is part of your memory, even if you never see her with your own eyes. That means, in a very real sense, that you've already been there. That some small pattern of you has brushed past Jonah in a corridor, or sat in the lounge staring out at warped stars, or stood in the core chamber listening to the hum. You're a passenger. But you're also more than that. You're still moving forward one second after another through your own thickened little slice of time. You still get to choose where you go, who you hold, what you remember. The knot is out there, drifting through its own strange neighborhood of spacetime, full of echoes of people who were stuck with choices they didn't understand. People whose worst moments arrived early and got trapped like flies in amber. But you're still in the part of the story where things can change. So if you ever find yourself staring at the stars and thinking about the Ariadne, spare a thought for Jonah, minding his impossible station. For the commuters and the children and the dead woman in the corridor. For all the passengers whose memories had nowhere to go but backward. And then maybe, make a small, quiet decision to be a better node in your own little network of knots. To leave behind memories that you wouldn't mind arriving early. To be, in the loops and tangles of other people's lives, a soft place to land instead of a sharp edge. The universe doesn't care. But we do. And sometimes, in the spaces where time gets weird and stories knot themselves into something larger than any one life, that's enough to make it hurt less. And